When Dr. Phil held that envelope in his hands, everyone in the studio knew nothing would ever be the same again. The cameras were rolling, the audience was silent, and a family of 3 sat frozen, waiting for a truth that would shatter 4 decades of lies. But what no one expected was that Dr. Phil would do something he'd never done before: stop the cameras, clear the room, and change the entire trajectory of the show. What happened next would become one of the most powerful moments in television history. It had started 3 weeks earlier. Sarah Mitchell, a 42-year-old schoolteacher from Ohio, had submitted a desperate application to the Dr. Phil show. Her message was simple but devastating. "I need to know who my real father is, and my mother refuses to tell me the truth." The production team had seen thousands of family drama submissions, but something about Sarah's story stood out. She had recently been diagnosed with a rare genetic kidney disease and desperately needed to find biological relatives for a potential donor match. Her mother, Linda, had always told her that her father was Michael Carson, the man who had raised her. But inconsistencies in family medical history had led Sarah to question everything. But nobody knew that the truth was far more complicated than anyone could imagine. When Sarah, her mother Linda, and the man she'd called Dad for 42 years, Michael, walked onto the Dr. Phil stage that Tuesday morning, the audience saw what looked like a typical family paternity case. Linda, 68, sat rigid in her chair, arms crossed defensively. Michael, 70, looked defeated, his hands trembling slightly. Sarah sat between them, a folder of medical documents clutched to her chest. Dr. Phil began with his signature directness. "Sarah, you're here because you need answers. Linda, you're here because your daughter's life may depend on finding biological relatives. And Michael, you're here because the woman you raised as your daughter needs to know the truth. So let's start with you, Linda. Why won't you tell Sarah who her biological father is?" Linda's jaw tightened. "Because some things are better left in the past." "Better for who?" Dr. Phil pressed. "Your daughter is facing a life-threatening illness. This isn't about protecting old secrets anymore. This is about her survival." The audience murmured in agreement. Linda looked away, tears forming in her eyes. What Dr. Phil didn't know yet was that Linda wasn't protecting just one secret, she was protecting 3. "I was young," Linda finally whispered. "I made mistakes. Michael forgave me, we got married, and we raised Sarah together. That's all that matters." "But Michael isn't Sarah's biological father, is he?" Dr. Phil asked, turning to Michael. Michael shook his head slowly, his voice breaking. "I always knew. From the moment Sarah was born, I could see she didn't look like me. But I loved Linda, and I loved that baby. So I stayed. I raised her as my own." Sarah began to cry. "Dad, you knew all this time? You are my daughter," Michael said firmly, reaching for her hand. "Biology doesn't change that." Dr. Phil paused, letting the moment breathe. Then he turned back to Linda. "So who is Sarah's biological father?" Linda remained silent. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Linda, I need you to understand something. We already ran the DNA test. We have the results right here." He held up a sealed white envelope. "Now you can tell us the truth, or I can open this envelope and we'll all find out together." The studio went completely silent. The cameras zoomed in on Linda's face as she struggled with a decision 4 decades in the making. "His name was James," Linda finally said, her voice barely audible. "James Crawford. He was Michael's best friend." The audience gasped. Michael's head dropped into his hands. "We had an affair," Linda continued, tears now streaming down her face. "It was brief, it was wrong, and when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know who the father was. James left town before Sarah was born. Michael stayed. So I convinced myself, I convinced everyone, that Michael was the father." Sarah stared at her mother in disbelief. "Dad's best friend? You slept with Dad's best friend?" But Dr. Phil's expression suggested he knew something else. Something the family wasn't prepared for. Linda, Dr. Phil said carefully, when we ran Sarah's DNA test, we didn't just look for paternity. We ran it through several databases to help find potential donor matches for her kidney disease. Linda's face went pale. What did you find? Dr. Phil looked at his production team off camera. Stop the tape. The cameras stopped rolling. The audience froze. This had never happened before. Dr. Phil walked to the edge of the stage and spoke directly to his producers. I need everyone except essential crew out of here. Now. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. As the audience was ushered out, confused and whispering, Dr. Phil returned to the stage. The family looked terrified. Only 2 cameras remained, their red lights off. Before I open this envelope, Dr. Phil said, his voice low and serious, I need to prepare you for something. Sometimes DNA tests reveal information beyond what we're looking for. Sarah, your tests revealed matches to relatives you didn't know you had. And those matches led us to discover something about your biological family tree that changes everything. He opened the envelope slowly, scanning the results. His jaw tightened. He looked at Linda, then at Sarah, then at Michael. Michael, Dr. Phil said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you have a brother? Michael looked confused. Yes. Thomas. But he died in a car accident 6 months before Sarah was born. Why? Dr. Phil's expression softened with something between compassion and disbelief. Because according to this DNA test, Thomas was Sarah's biological father. Not James Crawford. Not you. Your brother. The studio went completely silent. Linda's face drained of all color. That's impossible. Linda whispered. Thomas and I we never. The DNA doesn't lie, Linda. Dr. Phil said quietly. And there's more. Sarah's genetic markers match with someone currently in the database. Someone who's also looking for biological relatives. He pulled out a second sheet of paper. Sarah, you have a half-sister. Her name is Emma Crawford. She's 43 years old, and she's been searching for her biological father her entire life. Sarah couldn't speak. Michael looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Linda was shaking her head in denial. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Emma Crawford, Dr. Phil continued, is James Crawford's daughter. James, the man Linda claimed was Sarah's father, actually fathered a child with another woman around the same time. Emma has been in our database looking for paternity answers. When Sarah's DNA was processed, the system flagged a sibling match, but with different fathers. Dr. Phil paused, letting the complexity sink in. Thomas and James were brothers. Which means Sarah and Emma are cousins through their fathers, but the DNA shows a half-sibling match because Thomas and James had the same father. Michael finished, his voice hollow. My father. Their father. Wait, Sarah said, her mind racing. If Thomas was my biological father, and Thomas was Dad's brother, then Dad, you're actually my uncle. Not just the man who raised me, but my actual biological uncle. Michael nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. You're my brother's daughter. You're my family by blood after all. The revelation hung in the air like a living thing. Dr. Phil sat down on the stage floor, abandoning all protocol. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Linda, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. What really happened? Linda was sobbing now, her entire body shaking. It was one night. Thomas came to the house after a fight with his girlfriend. Michael was working late. We were drinking, and it just happened. Once. Just once. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew it couldn't be Michael's because we'd been having problems and weren't intimate. I panicked. I told Michael I'd had an affair with James because James had already left town. He could never confirm or deny it. Thomas died weeks later. I buried the truth with him. For 42 years. Dr. Phil said. You let Michael believe he'd raised another man's child out of the goodness of his heart. You let Sarah believe her father was a man she'd never met. And all this time, Michael was actually her biological uncle, connected to her by blood. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil stood up and walked to his production booth. Bring her in. A door at the back of the studio opened. A woman in her early 40s, with striking features remarkably similar to Sarah's, walked nervously onto the stage. Emma, Dr. Phil said gently. Meet Sarah. Your half-sister. The two women stared at each other, seeing their own faces reflected back. Emma's hands went to her mouth. Sarah stood slowly, as if in a trance. You look like me, Emma whispered. We have the same eyes, Sarah replied. They moved toward each other, and when they embraced, the remaining crew members openly wept. Michael watched from his chair, his face a mixture of grief and wonder. Linda sat frozen, unable to process the magnitude of what she'd hidden. Dr. Phil let them hold each other for a long moment before speaking. Sarah, Emma shares your same rare genetic markers. She's a perfect match for a kidney donor. Sarah pulled back, looking at Emma through tears. You'd do that? You don't even know me. You're my sister, Emma said simply. That's all I need to know. The truth had shattered a family's history, but it had also provided the miracle Sarah needed to survive. Dr. Phil called Michael over. Michael, you raised Sarah as your daughter when you thought she was another man's child. That took extraordinary love. Now you find out she's your brother's daughter, your actual blood relative. How does that change things? Michael looked at Sarah with infinite tenderness. It doesn't change a damn thing. She's been my daughter for 42 years. Finding out we shared DNA just confirms what I always knew in my heart. She was meant to be mine. Dr. Phil turned to Linda. And you? You held this secret for 4 decades. It almost cost your daughter her life. What do you want to say to your family? Linda stood on shaking legs, facing Sarah and Michael. I was a coward. I was ashamed, and I took the easy way out by lying. Thomas died, and I convinced myself the truth died with him. I stole 42 years of truth from all of you. I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, but it's all I have. Dr. Phil made a decision that would define his entire career. Here's what's going to happen. Dr. Phil said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Linda, you're going to enter intensive therapy. I'm connecting you with Dr. Ramani Devasula, who specializes in family trauma and truth reconciliation. Michael and Sarah, you're going to family counseling together to process this new understanding of your relationship. And Emma, you're going to join them, because you're part of this family now. He pulled out 4 business cards. I'm also connecting all of you with the National Kidney Foundation and Dr. Stevens at UCLA Medical Center, who will coordinate Emma's donor evaluation and Sarah's transplant if Emma is approved. Dr. Phil held up the DNA results one more time. This piece of paper destroyed a lie, but it also gave Sarah a chance to live. It gave Emma the sister she's been looking for. And it showed Michael that the love he gave for 42 years was never based on a lie. It was based on family. He looked directly at the camera. We'll be following this family through Sarah's treatment, Emma's donation process, and their journey to rebuild trust. Because that's what we do here. We don't just expose the truth, we help people heal from it. 3 months later, the cameras returned to document Sarah's successful kidney transplant. Emma's donation had saved her sister's life. Michael walked both his daughters down the hospital corridor, one on each arm. Linda watched from a distance, beginning her own long journey toward redemption. Dr. Phil sat with the family in Sarah's hospital room, the white envelope that had changed everything now framed on the wall. That envelope, Dr. Phil said, represented 42 years of hidden truth. But it also represents hope, healing, and the power of family, not just the family we're born into, but the family we choose and the family we become. Michael held both his daughter's hands. My brother Thomas has been gone for over 40 years. I thought I'd lost him forever. But he gave me the greatest gift. He gave me Sarah. And through Sarah I found Emma. My brother's legacy isn't death, it's the life and love in this room. The episode aired 6 months later, becoming the most watched Dr. Phil episode in history. The white envelope remains a symbol in Dr. Phil's office, a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, is the foundation of healing. Sarah and Emma are now inseparable sisters, their bond forged in DNA and strengthened by survival. Michael continues to be their father, his love validated by both choice and blood. And Linda, through years of therapy, is slowly rebuilding bridges she burned decades ago. Dr. Phil reflects on the moment he stopped the cameras. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is pause, step back from the production, and remember we're dealing with human lives. That envelope didn't just contain DNA results. It contained a family's entire future. And I'm honored I was there when they opened it. The story of that envelope reminds us that family is complex, truth is powerful, and love, real, unconditional love, transcends biology, secrets, and even 4 decades of lies. Sometimes it takes a DNA test to reveal what the heart has known all along. We are who we choose to be, and family is defined not by deception, but by devotion.